Forgive me for a moment. I'm one of the more COVID-phobic people you're ever going to meet, so I just want to get this right. Well, that video tribute was more than a surprise. Je suis bouleversée. C'est incroyable d'avoir le video clips des anciens premiers ministres. That was quite astonishing, and for anyone who was involved in putting that together, and I suspect my Chief of Staff, Deborah Endiger, was pretty closely engaged. We know that Paul Manley's not guilty, but it's pretty extraordinary, so allow me to collect myself. I also want to acknowledge that we're standing here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation, and again to say a heartfelt miigwech for extraordinary hospitality and generosity. It's not the convention we had planned, as Joanne just said, to be in a room with so few of our dearest friends. You will notice that I'm wearing the campaign button for my favorite candidate from 2019. You really shouldn't have favorites, but I married this one, so we've had quite the adventure. My husband and I, we only got married on Earth Day 2019 and went through an election and now a pandemic. And the good news is we're still in love, so that's good. I am deeply aware of the reality that although people talk about me as if I did all this stuff, it's not true. I'm part of a movement. I've always worked in that movement, and that movement is a movement for a better world. Some of those photos that went by in black and white, you might be wondering, what was that went by in black and white and looked like a little tiny girl sitting at a table with a bunch of, well, with my mom. That was actually my mother taking me to a press conference with her. I was basically a prop. I was there on behalf of all the innocent babies of the world who were being poisoned by atmospheric nuclear weapons testing. And my mother was launching a lawsuit internationally against the US, the UK, and Russia, the USSR at the time, along with 17 Nobel laureates. So that it just gives you one sense that I grew up in a household where we were taught from the very earliest age that if you see something, if you see an injustice, you say something. I remember, my mother still has it in a scrapbook, the first letter I ever wrote to a president of the United States about seeing the abuse of the little black children in Selma, Alabama when they were bused into school. We were raised from the very earliest age to know that one person can change the world. So here, what we've done globally is Global Greens. We're part of a global movement in 90 countries around the world. We do it from the grassroots up, never from the top down. So I was thinking as I was putting together some thoughts to share, because it's a great honor as we are on the verge of having our first newly elected leader since 2006. We're on the verge of a big change, and it's very generous of the party to ask me to share a few words, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So I'm thinking right now of other Green women leaders in Canada. I'm thinking of you because you're in the thick of it. So a shout out to Naomi Hunter, not so long ago elected leader of the Green Party of Saskatchewan, who is traveling across the province, largely on her own in some places, with the teams working hard in Saskatoon and Regina. She's on the road making sure that they have a full slate for the Saskatchewan election. That's right, the Greens in Saskatchewan currently have a candidate in every riding, but they have to collect all the signatures. They have to get her done. So a shout out to Naomi Hunter. And then at the other end of a spectrum of who has resources, who's already elected, who has already shown that you change the politics of your province, to my dear friend Sonia Furstenau, who, of bad luck in timing, was elected after a prolonged leadership race because of COVID, was elected leader of the Green Party of British Columbia on September 14th, only to have John Horgan break a fixed election date law and tear up the agreement for stable government and call a snap election, as we all know. Sonia's brilliant. Sonia's brave. And she and Adam Olsen, who hold the 2 Green seats in the BC legislature, will be joined soon by many more elected Green MLAs in British Columbia. There's only a matter of days before they vote, but they've got the platform together. They have 74 candidates lined up. So just, Sonia, just a shout out that I love you, and British Columbians are going to love you when they get to know you. Sonia, I love the idea of Premier Sonia Furstenau. It's got a very Borgen sound to it, really. And actually, that's so much better than that stale reality show, Horgan, but never mind. To my dear friend, Joanne Roberts, who took on the job nearly 11 months ago today of interim leader when I decided to step down and walk away, which I had promised my daughter I would do. I know my daughter would be watching this on TV tonight, but she's actually out in Vancouver right now. There's a Justice for Joyce rally. They're all over the country, and we better make sure we stick with that. But I just want to thank Joanne from the bottom of my heart for stepping up and being interim leader of the Green Party of Canada through a tumultuous year. I mean, who could have predicted COVID-19? I sometimes think it's like the old Monty Python skit, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition, but it's turned all of our lives upside down, and Joanne's handled it with tremendous grace and living up to all our green values. You know, a lot of people often ask me about what it's like to be a woman in politics. It's extraordinary to me when I think about it that in the 13 years that I served as leader of the Green Party of Canada, no other party had a woman leader. That's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for our little girls, that when they look at a stage where people are debating in a leaders' debate, they don't see a woman leader. So it does take a certain amount of, for all women in politics, particularly since social media got so vile, it does take developing a bit of a thicker skin. But women leaders in the Green Party are many, and my inspiration, a source of inspiration for me for a very long time, was a Green Party leader that I got to know back when we were part of the World Women's Congress for a Healthy Planet in '92, the founder of the Green Party of Germany, the late Petra Kelly. Now, when I spoke on that stage in Ottawa 14 years ago, August, to accept the leadership of the Green Party of Canada, I ended my speech with these words from Petra Kelly. We, the generation that faces the next century, can add the solemn injunction, if we don't do the impossible, we shall be faced with the unthinkable. On doit faire l'impossible ou faire face à l'impensable. Et actuellement, nous vivons dans les temps impensables. La pandémie, l'urgence climatique. Nous avons les déluges énormes, les feux de forêt catastrophiques, la fume dans l'air qui menace notre santé, les canicules mortelles, le fonte des glaces de l'Arctique, les feux dans les zones humides du Brésil, tellement fameux, la zone humide de Panatel. Chaque jour, à chaque jour, un nouveau désastre. Pardon-moi. The years that have passed since I read Petra's solemn injunction have seen global crises accelerating. The world is less fair. The climate change issue has accelerated to the climate emergency. Since that time I read those words, Canada's greenhouse gases have continued to rise. Also on the rise is an unwelcome new rider on one of the four horsemen of apocalypse, increasing trends towards white supremacy, racism, fascism, disguised as populism. To this we must also push back. We must bar the doors against such sinister forces of hatred. And we must shine a light. It's the light that we hold up, whether it's a torch, whether it's a lantern. The next leader of this party must continue to shine a light on hypocrisy, shine a light on those politicians that I am so disappointed in, so many of those who've said nice words about we must act to address the climate crisis and then don't. Don't worry if I'm looking at you, John Horgan. I am so angry that today they're diverting the Peace River for the Site C Dam, and no British Columbia government official can speak to it, they say, because there's an election. Convenient that. We must hold a light high also that gives people hope, that shows every single part of our society that if we hang on to each other and hang on together, we can get through a pandemic and we can resolve and avoid the worst of the climate crisis. Recently, speaking virtually to a gathering of the Union of BC Municipalities, Margaret Atwood was asked what she thought of the idea that because of COVID-19, action on climate had to be pushed to a back burner. And she said, well, I don't know about you, but my stove has 2 front burners. That's how we must look at these dual crises. The pandemic of COVID-19 that threatens our health in the near term. We have to make sure our kids are safe going back to school. We have to make sure that women are safe to go back to work. This is a real and present danger, and it's not over yet. We must have trust in our institutions enough to say, if a medical officer of health tells us something, we do it. We don't debate it. And at the same time, we have to be able to look at the climate crisis and say, we also, in the same instance, have to listen to the science. In the same way, we have to take the advice of scientists and not question it, but do it. Because the reality of this is that the climate emergency is a far greater threat to humanity, to loss of millions of lives, to the collapse of human civilization within the lifetime of our children if we don't get our act together. But here's where it's important for Greens to be clear in speaking truth to power. That truth can't lead anyone to feel despair. We don't have time for despair. It's an enormous threat. We must hang together, believing and knowing that we have it within ourselves to change our society, to turn away from fossil fuels, and to turn towards those wonderful new technologies that will deliver all the services that, let's face it, fossil fuels were a one-time miracle for humanity and catapulted us to levels of progress and technology that we could never have imagined in the 1800s or, for heaven's sakes, the 1500s. We haven't been on this planet that long as a species, but in a cosmic blink of an eye, we've become the dominant force on this planet. We are now the single biggest threat to our own survival, and we have to, as Greens, make sure everyone understands that we should have and we must have hope. The kind of hope we need. I'm carrying a book to the podium. If I could, I'd read you aloud the whole book. This is Thomas Homer Dixon's new book, Commanding Hope, which presents hope not as some sort of dewy-eyed dreamer idea, but as an actual tool in our hands so that we can save ourselves. As US academic David Orr said a number of years ago, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. That's where you find Greens, doing the work, commanding the hope to say, we don't give up. Or as Thomas Homer Dixon talks about in his book, he is not prepared to tell his children that we are a failed species. I'm not prepared to tell my children and grandchildren that. This generation, those of us who are still, I'm 66, okay, what more can we do? Well, we can do more. We must do more. We are the generation most responsible, and we cannot walk away, or in this case, die, and leave our kids with this Mad Max world of a dystopian nightmare. We won't do it. We can't do it. Ça m'inspire écouter les paroles des jeunes militantes, écolos et antiracistes. Ils ont le courage d'être toujours honnêtes contre le pouvoir, contre les mensonges. Ça m'inspire les jeunes de Canada. It is still for us, collectively, the young, the old, the rich, the poor, all of us together, Canadian society pulling together, that can make this difference, that can still provide leadership to the world. It is, as Petra Kelly told us we must do, It is our responsibility to do the impossible. Not to be afraid of the fact that once you say it's impossible, it looks like you're tilting at windmills, that you're naive idealists who don't understand the real world. In the real world, as Greta Thunberg says, our house is on fire. And although I initially absorbed her words as metaphor, they increasingly feel literal. Our house is on fire. We have to listen to the science on climate just as much as we listen to the science on COVID. When the chief medical officer, Theresa Tam, told us to stand 6 feet apart, the politicians in this country didn't say to her, "Sorry, Dr. Tam, we think 3 feet should be good enough for you because you know that other party won't give you 3 feet, so this is the best you're going to get." Same thing on climate. We cannot have the same target Stephen Harper left behind and have a speech from the throne that says, well, we're going to do better than that 2030 Harper target. Well, we have to do double that if we're going to ensure our children have a livable world. That livable world will require a lot of changes for social justice, equity, fairness, and also, of course, a hospitable climate. Nelson Mandela had a wonderful comment on doing the impossible. He said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." So for all of you out there who've ever thought about voting Green or wondered about what difference it makes to have Greens in Parliament, in legislatures across the country, and thank you to all my friends who contributed to that video, that was so lovely. But I remember when one of you, I won't say which one because I don't want to out the reporter who went, sometimes reporters tell politicians things that are actually off the record. But one of our new wonderful Greens had been elected in a province across Canada, and I was doing an interview in a studio in that province, and the reporter said to me, "You know, we're awfully glad he got elected because our legislature needed an integrity transfusion." That's what we bring to legislatures across Canada. That's what's needed in Victoria, in Regina, in Ottawa, in Fredericton, in Halifax. That's Charlottetown. That's what's needed. So our job in doing the impossible is to actually make the future we need real to Canadians. A future that we can embrace must be made real. A future where racism is a thing of the past, where Indigenous truth, justice, and reconciliation are actually realized, not just talked about, but respected and done. A future where nobody has to go without needed medication because they don't have a drug plan that covers something they need and they can't afford it. Pharmacare is essential. We were the first party in the last number of decades to put it in our platform. Guaranteed livable income. We were the party that led the way, and now lots of parties are talking about it. And I do say to other parties, please do continue to steal our ideas, but don't just take the words and then let us down by not delivering. We can, as Canadians, build the kind of country built, again, like the Green Party is, at the grassroots. Resilient communities where we take care of each other. That's the essence of Canada for me, that we're a country where south of the border, there's no universal health care. The only industrialized country in the world with such an atrocity. Here we are just over the border, having made that decision that no one goes without medical help. Well, now we need to make the decision that nobody goes without enough money to have a roof over their head, feed their kids, and not be afraid of a mortgage foreclosing during a pandemic. We now have to be the ones, and our new leader will take forward this cause, explain it to Canadians better than I ever could, because we are going to build the society we want and we need. And in that, Canadians know how deeply we care for each other. We're a country built on compassion, and we will keep each other safe until that day when we're able to hug each other again. Merci. Thank you.